So we're nearing the end of this unit, and today what we're going to talk about are the 12 greatest public health achievements in Canada. If you look at Canada over the last 100 years, the average lifespan of Canadians has increased by over 30 years, right? And this is because of a number of factors, and we're going to talk about them. So the first thing is addressing the social determinants of health. So basically, what public health looks at is what are all the conditions that end up making somebody healthy, right? What are all the different things that people have to live in? What's their education? What's their social connections? All those kind of things have a big influence on their health, all right? So the social determinants of health are things like what conditions were you born in? So if you're born in poor, really poverty-stricken, high crime area, chances are you're going to be less healthy than somebody who's born in a richer area with low crime, good food, fresh food, easy access to grocery stores with fresh food, all that kind of stuff. All right, where do you grow up? Again, are you growing up in a poverty-stricken area? Are you growing up in an area where it's really difficult to get fresh food? Are you growing up in an area with high crime? Are you growing up in an area where the schools are terrible and your education is really terrible? Okay, so where you live, where you work, are you working in a safe workplace? Are you working somewhere where you're exposed to a lot of toxic chemicals? Are you working somewhere where you're working long hours, all crazy sorts of hours? So that's going to determine your health. And also looking at how you age. So are you somewhere where you're being cared for as you get into older age, or are you somewhere where you're just kind of left and neglected? Okay, so basically what they wanted to do was change the conditions that make people sick in the first place. All right, so Canada is an international leader on improvements in housing, sewage treatment, garbage disposal, malnutrition. So Canada's a real world leader. All right, we've done some really great things when you look at the average income of people, when you look at the education for people, when you look at the promotion of social connections with other people, how we have like clubs that are set up so you can meet with other people, and we've got old age get-togethers, and we've got the YMCA, all that kind of stuff where you can make some social connections. And also if you look at early childhood education and development, all right, so we're looking at the types of things that affect how people basically grow up from birth till death. All right, so this Dr. Brock Chisholm in 1946 says health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So it's not just that you don't have a cold, it's the whole entire person. Okay, the next. So Canada does a great job at controlling infectious disease, and you'll see around everywhere you'll hear, especially lately, the importance of making sure you wash your hands properly. Way back, quite a few years ago, they really got on a campaign about coughing and sneezing into the crook of your arm rather than into your hands, or making sure your mouth was covered. In 1867, tuberculosis would have been a leading cause of death in Canada. Now, you hardly ever hear of anybody with tuberculosis. There still is a problem with tuberculosis in Native communities because of the poor living conditions that a lot of people live there. Okay, we do a great job at infection control. We make sure we have strong vaccination programs. We make sure that people have access to medications such as antibiotics. So if they've got a communicable disease, it can get treated. All right, and then we do a lot of job at making sure we educate people on the importance of not spreading disease. All right. Also really great in Canada is the decline in deaths from coronary heart disease and from stroke. In 1997, the death rates from heart disease was half what they were in 1967. And this is attributed a lot of times to having really good education. So educating people on how to prevent heart disease and stroke in the first place. So by example, decreasing your smoking, increasing your physical activity, increasing your good eating, all right? Making sure that your people who have high blood pressure, their high blood pressure is managed, right? They have good access to health care so they can get in, see a doctor, and make sure that their blood pressure is being treated. So Canada is a world leader in the treatment and control of hypertension, which is high blood pressure. So we've done really, really well at cutting down the number of deaths from heart-related illnesses. All right, could do better, but we're really doing well. One thing Canada has done well, at least since 1969, is having access to family planning. if you look back in history, women have always tried to control their reproductive system, right? If you go back to 3,000 years BC, they found some ancient condoms made out of animal intestines. In Egypt, they found spermicides made out of crocodile dung and honey. So, you know, women have always tried to control the reproductive rate. At one time, women gave birth to about one baby a year. So you figure having those massive families, usually very poor families, they're not going to have money to clothe and feed those children or educate them or anything else. All right. In 1892, birth control was considered illegal in Canada. Actually, the story about birth control is really, really interesting. Again, one of those things I could spend years and years on. Even educating women about family planning in 1892 was illegal, and it was illegal all the way up into 1969, which is when birth control was, or the pill anyway, was decriminalized. All right, the birth control pill was invented in 1960, so it's still relatively new technology to control your fertility. But you know, now that women have access to family planning, it means that you have a greater chance of having healthier children. Okay, we also have healthier environments. So Canada, once again, was or is a world leader on environmental policies. So at one point you would see, you know, smokestacks completely spewing pollution out. When they were first smelting in Sudbury, they you know, basically destroyed the whole land around Sudbury, and then they built the super stack, which kind of spread all their toxic gases to all around the place. Now they've managed to be able to clean up the emissions from those smelting companies so well that they are actually going to be taking the super stack down. So they've really done some great work at making sure that what's coming out of the factories is clean. Still a lot more work to do, but basically they've taken lead out of gasoline. Mercury is no longer available. In 1894, sewage and water control became a big thing in Quebec. If you remember, well, you don't remember because you were not born, but in Montreal was a really, really poor city, a lot of great big slums, a lot of really sick people. And one of the things they did was they made sure they had proper sewage removal, and they made sure that people had access to clean water, and that really, really helped people live a lot healthier. In 1945, fluoride was first added to the water in Brantford, and they found that fluoride really decreases the number of cavities that people have in their mouth, or that children grow with in their mouths. Now, there's always a big controversy with fluoride, and I know in Windsor there's this big thing, and they took the fluoride out of the water a few years ago, and then now they're putting the fluoride back in because they're like, oh my God, look at all these kids have rotting teeth. So anyway, right now, about 70% of communities have access to fluoridated water, and you're still going to have anti-fluoride people as well, but that's just silly. We have things like scoop laws so that our water doesn't end up being polluted with dog poop. So if you just look at any public health stuff, makes sense. Don't feed the ducks down at the waterfront, all that kind of stuff. So the next thing we do is we've made sure that we have much better, healthier moms and babies, all right? If you take care of moms tend to do better at taking care of babies. Babies are healthier when moms are healthier. Okay, because mother's health equals baby's health. So in 1945, up to 1945, most moms didn't receive prenatal care at all. So nothing. You got pregnant, you just lived your life, all right? And then hopefully you had a healthy baby. Chances are one of your children would die before a year old. Chances are another one would die before they're 5. Chances are if there was some type of epidemic, a whole pile of your children would die. All right. In 1921, there were 100 baby deaths per 1,000 live births. In 2004, so I know it's a while ago, we're down to 0.5 baby deaths per 1,000 births. So that's nothing. So moms are screened for all sorts of things now before they have their babies. Now these pictures are kind of creepy, but I just think they're kind of interesting because what they would do in Victorian times was, remember, people didn't have a whole lot of money. What they would do is they would take these pictures. If their child died, a lot of times they would take a picture of the child, or they'd take a picture of the mom and child as a memento of that child, because it was not like today where you just take 1,000 pictures of your kids. Usually you had one picture of your child, and hopefully it was, you know, when they were a little bit older. but they would take these memento mori pictures of them, and that would help them go through the grieving process. I was just reading, though, it said grief counselors now suggest not taking pictures of your dead baby because it can add to the grieving process. Here's another picture of two little guys who had died probably in the same epidemic. All right, so if we look at infant deaths over the last, how many years? Okay, last 80 years. All right, really, both mom and baby infant mortality rate has dropped. We have one of the lowest mother and baby mortality rate in the world. United States is much higher than this. So when they're touting their great medical system, or when people in Canada go on and on about how, look at the American system, it's so much better, absolutely not one tiny bit true. Okay, here's some things that we do to make sure that mums are healthy. All right, so we educate pregnant women on how to quit smoking, and really give them some support to quit smoking during pregnancy, or massively cut down, because the more a mom smokes as a baby, the smaller the burst size of a baby. And I know people think, oh, it's easier if your baby's small to push it out, but a smaller baby has greater chances of having other difficulties as well. Okay, here's the title coming up. The next thing is screening, counseling women who drink alcohol during pregnancy. The right amount of alcohol to drink during pregnancy is 0. All right, so hopefully women who drink a lot or do drugs get some screening and counseling so that they can get some help while they're pregnant to cut down on their alcohol and drug use. Really promoting moms to understand the importance of having prenatal vitamins. And here's that folic acid again. Remember, folic acid is really important for proper DNA development, and having a diet that's rich in folic acid helps for neural tube development in the developing baby. All right. We also supplement a lot of breads and flours with folic acid because it's a way to make sure that people get enough folic acid in their diet. Maternal screening or triple test. So this is for moms. If you don't have to get this done, but they recommend it for older moms so that you can see if there's going to be some genetic abnormality in babies before they're born, and you can make a decision of whether or not to continue that pregnancy, or at least be prepared when the baby's born. Okay, HIV testing. If mums know they have HIV, then you can give the mums the proper types of drugs, and then the baby doesn't necessarily have to be born with HIV. Okay, next one we do is Group B streptococcus screening. So mums will get swabbed for this Group B streptococcus, because if the baby is infected with this Group B streptococcus when it's born, it can actually kill the baby within a couple of days. So if you make sure you found out if the mum has it, you can treat the baby right away when it's born without the streptococcus bacteria overtaking the baby's body before you realize it has it. Helping moms learn how to breastfeed. So in the 1970s, breastfeeding really fell out of favor. Well, before even the 1970s, breastfeeding really fell out of favor, and the big push was for formula, which had all the measured amount of nutrients that babies supposedly need. So now they've gone back to breastfeeding and really giving moms support for breastfeeding. And you'll see in places where there's breastfeeding rooms and mom and baby rooms and all that kind of stuff. And there's laws against discriminating against women who are breastfeeding. A lot of workplaces are really supportive of moms that are breastfeeding now too. Again, of course, if you try and it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world at all. It's just breast is best, they always say. If you can't do it, the most important thing is a healthy mom. And if you're unable to breastfeed, the second best thing is the really good formulas that they have out here, and a mom that's relaxed and calm and is able to take care of a baby rather than beating herself up not being able to breastfeed. Okay, so number 8, parents' education on proper sleeping position. So way back when, who knows how all this kind of stuff changed, but people were suggested to put their babies to sleep on their tummies, and then they found that they had a higher incidence of sudden infant death, so SIDS. So I know when my oldest one was born, the rule was to put your baby on their side. And then by the time my second son was born, which was 2 years after that, the rule was to put your babies to sleep on their back. So the rule now is to make sure babies are sleeping on their back. It decreases the amount of sudden infant death. Okay, next thing is, again, immunization of moms and babies. We've gone through the importance of making sure that you have being immunized, and making sure moms are immunized, because you would hate to have a mom that has something like whooping cough and infects her own baby. Right? So, and again, remember, we vaccinate the babies because they don't have the antibodies to a lot of these diseases, and babies are most susceptible to dying from these things. So that's why we immunize children when they're little, not to poison them like people would have you think. Okay, and then this one's funny. You've probably heard your parents say, "Oh my God, when we were young, we drove in the car with no seat belts, and oh, we're still alive. We never had to have bike helmets when we were little, and we're still alive, blah, 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 blah." Well, anyway, there were a lot of kids who died or had like severe concussions because they didn't wear seat belts, or because they didn't have bike helmets, or because there weren't, there weren't rules about cribs, so kids could stick their head through the slats in a crib and literally strangle themselves. So now we have a very big public health education and counseling of how to reduce deaths from unintentional injuries. All right, so we have a lot of education on proper car seats. Right, and proper car seat installation. I remember having a huge argument with a friend one time about the tether straps that were in the car seats, because she insisted they weren't important, and I kept explaining to her that if you don't have the tether straps in there, then if you get an accident, your baby shoots out of the car seat like a man out of a cannonball and goes through the front windshield. Anyway, I just vowed never to drive in the car with her, because I did not want to see her baby shoot through the front of the window screen. Okay, next thing that we've done a really great job at is motor vehicle safety. So in the mid-1970s, there were about 6,000 deaths a year from car crashes. Now there's about 2,500 deaths per year. Okay, that's just car crashes. So whether or not they're drunk driving or whatever, that doesn't distinguish in the statistics. So basically, we've done a lot of things to make vehicles much safer. And Canada, again, has been on the forefront of a lot of these things. So we've done a lot of education on the importance of alcohol, drug use, and driving, not to be drunk driving or drug driving. All right, seat belts became mandatory in 1971. The daytime running lights, so you'll notice a lot of Canadian, or most Canadian cars, have lights that stay on in the daytime, and that helps you be able to see the car a lot sooner on the road from farther away than the cars that don't have the daytime running lights. I find it kind of unnerving when we're in the States and there's all these cars running around, nobody has lights on in the daytime. Okay, we've got airbags that, on the front and the side and the back, all over the place. We've got those divided highways now with the rigid barriers. So the divided highways cut down the collisions by about 60%. And then those rigid barriers, which I always thought was crazy having these big cement barriers in there, but they actually decrease the deadly car crashes by 52%. Okay, and one rule that's come out within your lifetime or within your memory are the banning the cell phones and the distracted driving. Okay, so Canada does a really good job at looking at what makes motor vehicles unsafe, and then educating the public on how to drive more safely. Okay. All right, so Canada's been really good at recognizing tobacco as a health hazard. The whole story of tobacco versus the world is so interesting. It goes on forever and ever, and can't believe what liars tobacco executives are. But anyway, Canada is more progressive than most countries in the world at reducing the amount of smokers, and also disallowing smoking in public areas. They've done a really, really great job. So we've reduced our smokers by education programs and having people change the attitude towards smoking. All right, and way back in 1908, it was illegal to sell tobacco to anybody who was under 16 years old. So that's well over 100 years ago. They already recognized that selling cigarettes to young kids was probably not great. Although, that being said, my husband used to go to the corner store with a note from his dad and buy cigarettes for his dad all the time. So whatever. So in 1970s, the evidence of smoking effects on the developing fetus during pregnancy was brought out. In 1999, Victoria was the first city in Canada to ban smoking in all public places. And then, of course, in 2013, North Bay banned all smoking in public places. Now, this woman on this cigarette box is pretty interesting. She is a Canadian woman. Her name's Barb Tarbox. It's on here somewhere. Oh, there it is. So she actually knew she was dying of, first it was lung cancer that spread to her brain. She was from Edmonton, and she knew she was dying from smoking-related cancer, and she actually asked to be on the cigarette packs to show other people that this is what you can end up looking like if you smoke. And I know people will say, oh, my grandpa smoked for 90 years and he could still run a marathon, blah blah blah. Most people, that's not true. There's always an exception to every story, but this is more realistic for what smoking looks like. Okay, we also are very good at having safer and healthier foods. So if you figure 100 years ago, scientists didn't really even know, or just over 100 years ago, in 1916, they just discovered that vitamins were in food. So we didn't really realize how important food was with disease. But now they're starting to realize that there are diseases that are caused because of malnutrition. So we've done a really great job at Canada making sure that our food is as safe as it possibly can be. This is a kind of cool story. So if you lived somewhere away, doggone, I just gave away the picture. But if you lived somewhere away from the ocean, so if you lived around the Great Lakes, you may have salt, but you wouldn't have salt with iodine in it, and iodine is in sea salt. So what ended up happening was you need iodine for your goiter to work properly, for your thyroid to work properly. And if you didn't have enough iodine, then what your thyroid would do is it would increase in the number of cells, thinking that it needs to get bigger to somehow capture more iodine. So you would end up with this thing that's called a goiter around your neck. All right. So when they started to put iodine into regular table salt, the number of goiters decreased greatly around the Great Lakes. And they also had this thing that happened around the Great Lakes where children who were born to moms who were really low on iodine ended up having this form of illness that was called cretinism. So this is where the word cretin comes from. So they were, let me see if I have a picture here. They were babies that were born with intellectual and developmental delays. All right, so once we started putting iodine in the salt, we hardly ever see babies that are born like this at all anymore. Right, only happened in areas that were far from the sea. So the next thing we're very good at in Canada is having safer workplaces. Canada is one of the most advanced workplace safety countries, all right? And this is kind of scary when new governments come in, or you look at governments in other countries that want to cut back on regulations. So it's not just environmental regulations they want to cut back, but it's also safety regulations. And when they talk about red tape and being able to get through all the red tape, part of the red tape is that we do have workplace safety rules in place that have to be followed. And a lot of big companies, I'm not going to say all of them, but sometimes big companies find those really cumbersome to work with, and it's easier to go to some country that don't have the same number of workplace rules. Okay, so if we look at 1988, even in 1988, there were 40 deaths per 1,000 workers, and by 2006, where it was down by half, so it was only 20 workplace deaths per 1,000. So we've done a really, really, really great job at making sure that workplaces are safe places. And that's why whenever you guys go to a job, you have to do that WHMIS training over and over and over again, because you need to know the safety rules in your workplace and what your rights are. Okay, so the other thing we did that's great in Canada is our universal policies. So universal policies are things that are based on, not things that everyone can get because they're Canadian, not just because you're a rich person. So these are policies that are based on your age, on your residence, on your citizenship, not your income. So the things like having access to healthcare, having access to education. So we basically all have access to the same type of education, having access to welfare or disability if you're disabled, having access to unemployment insurance if something's happened and you can't work. All right, so these are universal policies. It's not just for rich people, it's for everybody. All right, so everybody, it doesn't work out perfectly like that, but compared to other countries, Canada does a much better job. All right, and then the last thing, which I know is always a dispute for some people, but vaccination. So here again is our picture of our polio vaccine. But in Canada right now, there's less than 5% of deaths in Canada are caused by infectious disease. So our infectious disease numbers have decreased massively over the last few years. So they're highly effective. They're very safe. If you read the anti-vaccination information that'll scare the bejeebers out of you. But remember, a lot of that stuff is highly, highly exaggerated. And if you keep in mind, when you look at smallpox, the mass vaccination was a thing that managed to wipe out that disease worldwide. Okay, so now that's the end of this lesson. So for this lesson, there's going to be one short assignment where you're going to be writing a letter, and you're going to be writing a letter to a friend to explain to that friend that is from another planet or another country or whatever it is about why Canada is one of the healthiest countries on the planet. All right, and you're going to be choosing any 6 of these health policies that we have in here, any of these 6 any 6 of them, and you're going to state it and then give an example of it. So you might have to do a little bit of research if you can't remember all the stuff I was blah blah blahing about, but that's going to be your assignment. So you're going to drop that into Dropbox. 1 page, it doesn't need to be fancy, but just do write it as a letter. So dear so-and-so, I'm just here to tell you about how great Canada's healthcare system is, and or how great Canada's public health is, and why we're the healthiest country on earth. Okay, sorry about the stumbling here at the very end. I don't have a script, so I'm just going off the top of my head. All right, so that's going to be in that assignment, will be posted and it'll be in the Dropbox for you. And then we've got one other public health activity to do, another case study, and then that's it for this unit. And it looks like we're out of school for a little bit longer, so we're going to be starting the new unit, doing this all online. Okay, so I will talk to you next time.